any IRA account, you cannot acquire collectibles, a baseball card, a rug, but there's nothing else that's strictly prohibited by the IRS as to what your IRA can invest in.
Welcome to the Freedom Point Real Estate Podcast, where we talk about creating more time freedom through passive real estate investing. Passive investing in real estate challenges conventional investment wisdom. We are passionate about learning and sharing resources with others who are ready to transform their investing mindset. Quick disclaimer as always, I am not a CPA, I am not an attorney or a financial advisor. This is not financial advice, not telling you or anyone else what to do. The views and opinions expressed in these podcasts are provided for education and informational purposes only and are not necessarily the views of my employer, ADP. I'm glad you're here. Now let's dig in. All right, welcome back, Freedom Point listeners. Thank you for joining another episode of the Freedom Point podcast. I have a fantastic guest with me today, Adam Sypniewski. Hopefully, Adam, I'm saying your last name right, Sypniewski. Adam comes to us from the Midland Trust company. Adam has a decade-long of experience in helping coach both real estate investment sponsors as well as their investors on the benefits of passively investing into alternative assets using their self-directed IRA dollars. So Adam, thank you for joining the show.
Excited to be here, Jeremy. Really grateful to be on and in front of this audience. And hopefully I'm able to share some wisdom today that hopefully they can benefit from. Really looking forward to getting into it with you.
Yeah, no pressure on that regard, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, I'm sure we're going to chop up a lot today. Like I said, I've been raring to go on this.
Good. My listening audience only looks for value in these episodes, so I appreciate your time in joining us today and providing some of your background and obviously some things that you've learned over the last 10 years of really coaching and guiding investors on SDIRA strategies. So with that said, maybe you can give my audience a little bit more about Adam. Maybe particular things that you like, what's kind of been your journey over the last decade, anything personal, business-wise that you'd like to share?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been in this kind of self-directed investing space since right before actually the financial crisis in 2007, 2008. That's kind of when I got into the space. And it was attractive because there was this alternative investing strategy that I was never really privy to coming out of school or in my very short investing history at the time. So things like, private companies, hedge funds, private notes, hard money lending, real estate, precious metals, all these asset classes were foreign to me. And so when I had come into the space back in 2007, it was all new, it was all exciting. And it actually was a great time given what was going on in the broader financial markets. I didn't really, I was a little naive at the time. I thought everything was down, but really it was a tremendous buying opportunity in a lot of markets at the time. And so looking back 15 years later, I realized that now, but it's been this journey over the last 15 or so years in the self-directed space where I've been able to come across not only investors that find great opportunities, but also deal makers, capital raisers, just very sharp people in across asset classes, but more particularly in the last few years, Jeremy, it's really gravitated towards real estate syndicators, the private fund managers that have really piqued my interest and have really have been where I've found myself. Providing value to people, providing education, raising awareness about self-direction, and using our retirement accounts to achieve some investment objectives that maybe we couldn't receive outside of our retirement account. And so I'd say that's kind of where I find myself now, is in front of these audiences, educating folks about how they can use that old 401k or that IRA that might not be performing into some new exciting opportunities.
That's great. Thanks for sharing that. How long has the self-directed IRA strategy been available to investors? And I say that because, most people that I talk to, they weren't aware that they could get involved in a self-directed IRA and actually choose the type of investments that they're investing their retirement dollars into. Is this something that's been around for 5 years, 10 years, 25 years, and we just haven't heard about it?
Yeah, it's almost been 50 years, actually. You're exactly right, Jeremy. You just haven't heard about it. It is, our industry does have an awareness gap. People aren't really educated that they can do something like this. And just to answer the question head on, is the ERISA law of 1974. That's when when IRAs were kind of that's when the provision of an IRA was kind of put forth. And people think of IRAs as almost like savings accounts, but even from their time that they were created, they've always allowed for this freedom to invest that wasn't, people just hadn't, discovered that there was more of this flexibility available with the IRA. I think it's more of a, condition of the market and who's been, talking about IRAs or who's been promulgating IRAs, which is, led us to believe it's more of the savings vehicle or maybe, we're kind of like limited to a certain pool of investing. But really, since IRAs were invented, there's really only been a couple of asset classes that are prohibited, which I'm sure we'll get into, Jeremy. But to answer the question, yeah, these have been around forever. If you're just hearing about them, great. Get ready, because it's an exciting world that you're going to be opening up to.
Yeah, I would wholeheartedly agree with that. I mean, the amount of investors that we, bring into our passive real estate investment opportunities is tremendous. When they hear that they don't have to come into those opportunities as an investor using cash, but rather they can use money that's locked up in an old IRA retirement accounts. I guess my thought here is, as I wonder, and maybe you can provide some more color here, but perhaps maybe the main genesis as to why people don't hear about this type of an investing strategy is because it's not something the financial advisors are talking about. Am I fair in saying that?
Yeah, it's spot on, Jeremy. So, when we talk about alternative investments, which broadly for the audience, that means, private investments, nothing traded on an exchange. The important thing with something that's traded on an exchange is brokered. It has a commission. There is it's a billable asset, what some would call in that space. When it comes to self-direction, you're taking ownership of your own retirement account. So really, when we use the term self-direction, it's just a marketing term, but it is to convey that you yourself are picking and choosing these investments to better your own retirement situation. So it's not an advised transaction in most cases, and it's not something where an advisor is going to be incentivized to put their client into, because one, they're not going to be able to collect a fee on it, and two, it might be seen as outside of their strategy, outside of their profile of investments, based on the way that they invest their clients' money. So a lot of times they might shy away from it. And I would say that, yes, you're exactly right, Jeremy, that advisors aren't going to promulgate that if they don't understand it, or more importantly, they can't necessarily get paid on it.
Yeah, to me, when I think about using a self-directed IRA strategy, it kind of makes me feel like you're taking the shackles off of that money and setting it free, because now the investor is able to make decisions on where that money is allocated into versus just sitting back and collecting that quarterly statement and hoping that old IRA investment strategy is keeping up with or exceeding the inflationary rate. So I want to ask another question for you, Adam, and that is related to the types of opportunities that you can use self-directed IRA money to invest into, because I'm relatively confident in saying that you can't use self-directed IRA money to go buy an RV, go buy a house to live in, that there's certain restrictions on what type of investments you're able to invest into. Am I framing that up correctly?
Yeah. So there's almost two frames we can use. Okay. So the what frame, which is what can we or what can't we invest in, and that's really limited to just two things, and it's what can't we invest in, and that's collectibles, and that's life insurance policies. So any IRA account, you cannot acquire a baseball card, a rug, a sports car, a vintage car, a vintage bottle of wine. Those are collectibles. Okay. Life insurance policies, that's pretty straightforward. But there's nothing else that's strictly prohibited by the IRS as to what your IRA can invest in. So that's the first frame, is the what frame. The other frame is the who frame. Who can you invest with? Who can your IRA invest with? And that's the more detailed response from the IRS, because they do detail a list of what they call disqualified persons to your IRA. And that really, it trues, when it comes to my IRA, the disqualified persons to my IRA are myself, my wife, my spouse, and then up and down my family tree. So my parents, my grandparents, my children, my grandchildren. So it's those lineal ascendants and descendants of your IRA that it cannot directly transact with. So when you talk about owning your own house, well, no, your IRA cannot buy from yourself. And there are some restrictions about use of the property when we talk about IRAs, which we'll get to. But it's more or less the who. So you can't, lend money to your spouse. You can't lend money to your parent. You can't invest in a house for your child to live in. It has to be for investment use only when we talk about real estate, and it has to be arm's length, meaning you can't have any of those lineal family members I described. As to like what you can invest in, well, world's your oyster. So the audience here, I would assume is turning their wheels about real estate. Absolutely. Whether you want a landlord that is, hold a home in your house, in your IRA, if you want to own a piece of a house, a commercial property, a syndicated deal, a real estate fund, or really any type of private fund. I mentioned direct lending is another thing that you could invest in, whether you want to lend to a colleague or an individual, or perhaps even an entity, even a business. If that lending agreement might be something like a safe agreement, where it might turn into equity at some point. All these types of things are allowed in an IRA, and we see a lot more of this migration towards passive investments, I think, with the retirement account, because as you may know, Jeremy, and as some of the audience know, is particularly when it comes to real estate, we kind of started there with this tangible asset of a whole home or landlording with our IRA. When that comes up, your IRA is responsible for all the expenses, all the maintenance on the property, paying the taxes. That gets kind of, gets a little bit of friction in the process when you're using a direct IRA account. So again, that would kind of dovetail into this migration we're seeing towards passive investments, where, like you said, maybe someone doesn't have the liquid 25, 50K to get into a good deal that they're sizing up. But guess what? 70% of our investable wealth is within our retirement accounts. So they can dip into that IRA. They can, as long as it's portable, we can get it into a self-directed account and get you into a deal. So definitely the passive investments are what we're seeing more of. But really, if you bring us something, we can take a look and see if we can hold it in an IRA for you.
I've got a couple of examples that I'd like to run past you that I oftentimes will get from investors. One is a number of my investors are in their 40s, maybe 50s. They've got high school kids, maybe college, age children, and they want to do what's called the house hack, where they want to maybe buy a townhome or a condo where their son or daughter is going to end up going to college, and they want to purchase that asset, maybe rent out units within that townhome or that condo while their own son or daughter is also living in that property. Would that property be eligible for the investor to use self-directed IRA, considering that one of the residents or tenants living in that condo or townhome is a direct descendant of the investor?
Great question, Jeremy. Yeah, that would be a great example of where we would run into a prohibited transaction potentially, because yes, that lineal descendant, that child is a prohibited is a prohibited individual to the IRA owner. So the parent who wants to hold the property in their IRA can absolutely do that. It's just that their direct descendant could not be the one paying them. Technically they should. The way the IRS rule is written is that they shouldn't live there. They shouldn't be paying them the rent, because there has to be that arm's length. That would come up, in my opinion, as an issue, breaking prohibited transaction rules.
My next question is, could someone use self-directed IRA money to invest in a franchise business?
Oh yeah, I mean, as long as the franchise is set up as, say, like an LLC, or they're not owning any sort of publicly traded stock or anything like that. I mean, that's absolutely, whether they're purchasing just the real estate that the franchise lives on, or the business itself. If it's an operating company, we've seen a ton of that. So, maybe not franchises, but I'll give you another example, is that we see a lot of like neighborhood property, something like a brewery. It's something like we see a lot of folks funding their, from their IRA, or something like here in Chicago, We have these boutique grocery stores called Foxtrot. We see some folks own some of those grocery stores in their IRAs. So yeah, I mean, franchise, as long as we're not publicly trading anything, Jeremy, we should find a feasible way to do it. We'll need a paper trail, whether there's like an operating agreement or a scheduled list of members in the case of an LLC. We just want to make sure that we can register the investor as an IRA as opposed to, say, an individual. So as long as there's a subscription agreement, operating agreement, scheduled members, whatever it might be, if there's a note, we'll be able to paper that into an IRA.
So I want to clarify one thing as it relates to using IRA money to invest into a business. I assume that strategy is okay as long as it checks some of the compliance boxes that you guys need to take that investor through. But the fact still remains, and that is the investor cannot be materially involved in the operations of that business, correct? It still must be passive.
Investment use only. So yeah. So that I can confirm, Jeremy. There are some things, and this is where maybe a legal advisor might be more appropriate, which is what we suggest to our clients, because I'm not a licensed CPA or a licensed attorney or anything like that. But when we think about operating companies, yes, when you perhaps own the majority of that business, or if you have the direction of that company is under your leadership, there's going to be some gray areas there. But so we can't tell you what is necessarily, how you can maneuver that. But there might be some legal advisors that could coach you there. But yes, that's a great point to make, Jeremy.
And I'm sure you guys have people on staff there at Midland Trust that can kind of walk through some of those, particulars. But my next question is so maybe I make that decision to start self-directing into alternative assets. Is it an all or none type of a scenario? Meaning, do I have to self-direct all of what I have currently sitting in an IRA, or am I allowed to self-direct just a portion of it?
Great question. And it is not an all or nothing proposition. So a lot of times folks will slice off just a portion of their IRA that they have today at, say, Schwab or something like that. And they'll transfer over, 50 grand, 100 grand of cash to do one specific deal or a couple of deals that they're looking at with a particular manager or deal maker. And that's all they're doing. That's all that they're going to do in their Midland Trust account, where the bulk of their retirement assets might still be in one of those large, broker custodian types where they're, holding NVIDIA stock and trading ETFs and doing the bulk of their strategy, but they'll just do the alternative sleeve with Midland Trust in their self-directed account.
Okay.
So no, we don't require the whole balance. A lot of times we're seeing partial transfers, partial rollovers of old employer plan money.
I'm going to run another scenario by you. So many times investors invest into real estate opportunities for the tax benefits, right? The tax benefits of the depreciation, right? I assume that there are no depreciation tax benefits when using IRA money to invest passively into real estate opportunities, because the investment in and of itself is already a tax-free growth strategy. So you're not really paying taxes on the, say, monthly distributions or the equity profit that you would receive when that deal goes full cycle. Am I saying that accurately?
Yes, yeah, that's correct, Jeremy. So because, everything that goes on in the IRA with a traditional IRA, a pre-tax account, we're talking about tax shelter, tax deference, right? So we're not paying taxes on the gains right now. We're all deferring everything until we're distributing from that account. Ideally with, past the age of 59 and a half. Now with the case of a Roth IRA, that can be tax-free growth, based on aging rules and basis and things like that. But you're right that you can't write off a loss in a retirement account against something outside of a retirement account. I'm not a CPA, but that would be my layman's take on it, because again, you're sheltered from the gains. You're not going to benefit from writing off the losses. So that's how I would respond to that.
Another scenario for you, say an investor comes across an opportunity that they would like to invest into, and they then make that decision to fund that investment using a self-directed IRA strategy. Approximately how long is it going to take that investor to engage with Midland Trust to the point in which they're able to release those funds into that investment that they're vetting out?
Yeah, it's another great question. Timing. How long does this stuff take? It usually takes a week to 2 weeks. It's a metric we track as an organization because we are aligned with our investors and with our deal makers to make sure that this IRA process gets set up quickly, easily, and the deal's funded. That is our goal for our clients, and then that's our client's goal, and that's the manager's goal. So we are very focused on making sure that the IRA can be opened quickly, funded quickly, and then into the deal. And so we've spent the last 2 decades, since really even before that, late 90s even, trying to make this process easier, faster, and better for everyone involved. And so, yeah, when you talk about how long does this take, if you have an IRA today that's liquid or has some liquidity, or we're looking at you being into a deal with your self-directed account in likely less than 2 weeks. A lot of times we're around about 10, 11 calendar days. It's because it is something that we do track.
Sure. Now, I probably should have asked this question 20 minutes earlier, but I'm going to ask it now. Is it required that the investor use a self-directed IRA custodian, or can they transfer money from their existing Schwab account, Fidelity account, American Funds account, John Hancock account directly into the investment? Is it a requirement that they use an IRA custodian in order to be able to utilize this type of a SDIRA strategy?
Yes. So please, for anybody listening, do not do what Jeremy just described. You will get taxed on that distribution. You could put yourself in a very very tricky tax situation if that happens, because just by sending money out of your retirement account does not make it an investment of your retirement account. There are certain, details that we have to make sure that we're registering the investment correctly. And, we want to make sure that your deal sponsor isn't holding it in your tax ID, in your social security number. We want to make sure that we're doing our role as custodian. And that's really why we exist, is because we're going to execute the investment on your IRA's behalf. We're also going to hold it in our name and in our tax ID. That's where the tax shelter comes from, is that, our tax ID is listed on that subscription, not your individual social security number. So if you did do that, where you sent a check from your, stroked a check from your Schwab account or sent to wire out your Fidelity account, your American account, your E-Trade account, that's going to be taxed as a distribution, and it's not going to be coded as an investment within your IRA. So that would be a major kind of a pitfall to watch out for the listening audience, for sure.
Adam, outside of the questions that I've already asked you today, what are maybe one or two other questions that potential investors ask of you before they make the decision to self-direct?
Yeah. So like who's eligible for this, or, more specifically, hey, Adam, I got a 401k with my job today. Can I use that to get into this deal? Active 401ks, folks. That's kind of what I'm trying to get down to, is that a lot of times, Jeremy, is folks come to me and they say, hey, I've accumulated 6 figures of a 401k with my company. Can I use that to get into an IRA? Well, a lot of times, if it's an active plan, folks, we cannot roll that over. It's the old employer plan. So 401k, 403b, TSP, whatever it might be, you have to have that separation of service. It has to be, it has to be an older plan that you haven't touched yet. That we call it portability. So whether, it has to be an old 401k or an existing IRA to get into a self-directed IRA, but really anybody who has that portable retirement money can open a self-directed account. There's no other eligibility or it's not like accreditation or anything like that. It's the self-direction. Again, it's more or less a marketing term, folks. So you can self-direct a traditional IRA. You can self-direct a Roth IRA. You can self-direct a SEP IRA for the business owners that are listening, or even an individual 401k, which is an incredible plan for those that can qualify for it. But again, the self-direction, no other qualification than I need portable retirement money in the form of an old 401k or an existing IRA today. I'd say that's one of the biggest ones, Jeremy.
Adam, I really appreciate your time joining me today on the Freedom Point podcast. How can our audience connect with you to learn more about what you're up to and learn more about Midland Trust?
Yeah, you can find me on the social medias. LinkedIn is where we're really present. I'm really present. But if you want to contact me directly, folks, adam@midlandtrust.com. You can shoot me an email. You can shoot me a text or a call anytime, 312-767-6863. I'm here in Chicago and around the country often. So would love to have a conversation, shake hands, meet up, join, appear at masterminds, whatever I can do to help the audience and be a resource. I'd welcome that opportunity. Jeremy, thanks so much for allowing me to come on today.
Yeah, thank you for being with us. And Freedom Point podcast listeners, thank you for jumping into another episode today. Look forward to catching you on the next episode.
Thank you for hanging out with us today and for listening to the Freedom Point podcast, powered by Starting Point Capital. This show is for entertainment purposes only. Nothing said on this show should be considered financial advice. Before making any financial decision, please consult with a professional. This show is copyrighted by the Freedom Point podcast. Written permissions must be granted before syndication or rebroadcasting. If you're interested in connecting, you can find contact information at startingpointcapital.com.